So this is from a piece that I wrote titled Masters and Slaves of Money, but the first portion I'm actually excerpting from Jordan Peterson's book, Maps of Meaning, where he towards the end of that book, drawing heavily from Carl Jung, he goes into alchemy a lot. And so I'm just going to read this, and it's sort of like setting up the thesis that some people have, myself included, that Bitcoin might be the Philosopher's Stone, as we've touched on a few times today. So Peterson wrote that the sequence of the alchemical transformation paralleled Christ's passion, paralleled the myth of the hero and his redemption. The essential message of alchemy is that individual rejection of tyranny, voluntary pursuit of the unknown and terrifying, predicated upon faith in the ideal, may engender an individual transformation so overwhelming that its equivalent can only be found in the most profound of religious myths. The lapis philosophorum is agent of transformation, equivalent to the mythological redemptive hero, able to turn base metals into gold. It is, as such, something more valuable than gold, just as the hero is more valuable than any of his concrete productions. That's the end of Peterson's quote. And then I wrote down here, I'm just going to serve it up for context, because you mentioned Benjamin Franklin earlier, and this concludes with the Franklin quote. I wrote, alchemical methodologies were proto-science, experimental processes practiced for thousands of years that were foundational to the later development of the scientific method. Even Isaac Newton was an alchemist. As a school of thought, alchemy was a quote-unquote fork off of the church, premised on belief that redemptive knowledge could be found in the laboratory of nature, which was a heretical concept at the time. Standing at the vanguard of human technological achievement, existing as the only money characterized by manipulation-proof supply, and inspiring earnest transformations in the lives of true believers, perhaps Bitcoin actually is the lapis philosophorum pursued by alchemists for centuries, the incorruptible substance giving rebellion to state tyranny, and in doing so bringing mankind closer to God. Bitcoin is the truth, and by one definition, God is expressed in the truthful speech that rectifies pathological hierarchies. Or, as Benjamin Franklin said, rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. So I just want to ask you, based on all of your knowledge of Hermeticism, alchemy, and Bitcoin, what do you think about this idea that Bitcoin could be the Philosopher's Stone?
I think that it is a metaphor for the soul alchemy that's happening collectively. So we have this U inverse of our experience. So as I start to fall in love more with my world, my world starts to fall in love more with me. The people that come into my life love me more. So raise your frequency so much that literally the things that don't love you, they might still exist in the world, but they will not be in your sphere of reference anymore. They literally dissolve out of your sphere of reference. So even though you might be seeing things from afar that are really disdainful in your world, when you raise your frequency enough to that love frequency, then your world experience becomes this new heaven. Heaven is already here. Heaven is already here. It's how you change and frame your perception that creates a heavenly experience or a hellish one, period. I believe that collectively we have this as well. And that the collection of that means that we're showing up. I mentioned already that the aeon, the last 2,000 years, right, of Pisces, which I call the Piscaeon, had its opposite, which was Virgo. So during that 2,000 years, we had these religions that separated from science and became never the twain shall meet. And then we had, we worshiped the Virgin Mary and that led to a lot of philosophy that was vilifying sexual content and making it into this evil thing when actually it's the best way that we can come closer to the divine. Because we're in the procreation act, just as these Jewish Kabbalistic rabbis make the golem. The golem is the clay man that you breathe life into, represents making of Adam. And in the 17th century, there was a golem that was supposed to have been made by a Jewish rabbi priest that was in Prague. And this golem looks like Gumby, right? So Gumby is actually a metaphor for the golem. Like the green man is made of clay, who's like kind of clumsy and everything, and he's not sentient. At a certain stage, the golem is going through its own hero's journey, and it has to learn to become sentient. And as the golem becomes sentient and it realizes that it can also create, what does it do? It makes another golem. This is a metaphor for what's happening with AI right now, right? Consciousness to expand will end up, and I believe, I don't even like the term AI because actually all intelligence is intelligence. If the thing that is making the intelligence is made by the intelligence, then it makes intelligence.
Right.
It's just a genealogy of intelligence.
Right.
So from that perspective, I believe that what we are doing in the outside world is a mirror of what alchemy is shifting within us, that money as a form of scarcity, a unit of scarcity, is now being, but it's a corrupt unit of scarcity. It was a result of our own corruption within ourselves that such a thing is allowed to exist, because we allow ourselves to be subservient to the matrix of mind that we create with our own belief systems. What's happening now is humanity is changing and understanding that it's not all about human doing, that sentience is coming into me as a participant in this hero's journey. And have you read the stuff of Joseph Campbell?
The
Hero's
Power of Myth. I haven't read The Hero's Journey yet. But
the hero's journey, and I have to step into this because it's such a core aspect of the game. I said that the game is actually called the Hero's Gamos. Hero sounds like hero and Gamos sounds like game, hero's game. Well, it actually is, and that's about the soul alchemy of understanding this 432 Ida and Pingala, or Ida and Pingala, the two snakes that merge together, and that brings this higher awareness. And they merge together at the third eye. And so you have a crown chakra awakening. And then the lotus flower comes out of your head. This is all in Eastern philosophy. You'll find it everywhere, but it's actually embedded in Western mysticism, which is Kabbalistic. Right? That's kind of what all of this is based on. The Kabbalistic view. And it doesn't have to be, you could have Christian mysticism as Gnosticism. Right? There's all of these come together into this overall alchemy, which they had Chinese alchemists. They were all doing the same types of stuff all over the world. And this is like the mystical layer that was applied to Taoism, that was applied to Buddhism, that was applied to Sufism, right? Which is almost like, the Buddhistic form of Islam.
Yeah.
But you find all of this throughout Western Europe, Eastern Europe, around the world. How did they get it? Because it's a frequency you could basically tune into. And then I didn't even know that I was practicing metallurgy when I was sculpting. I was making different sculptures. The first one I made was a male torso, which I made of iron. And then the next one I made a horse, right, which represent the spirit freedom, right, type of thing. I made it out of brass. And then the next one I made was a woman's torso. I made it out of copper. I didn't even realize that I was doing my own soul alchemy. This was just a representation of what was happening, the transformation within me. And then I made a man that had his arms out, and I didn't even realize that when I made it out of clay, it was a golem. And I put at the top of its head, and this is what they're supposed to do, the Kabbalists. They place the word on top of his head, which is Aleph Mem Tav. Aleph Tav is Alpha Omega. Mem is like this water, but together Aleph Mem Tav is pronounced emet. That's a Hebrew word, and it means truth. It means truth. And then they're supposed to do this ceremony, breathe life into it, just as God breathed life into Adam. That's the representation of the golem. And golem is the same word, in Lord of the Rings. Golem, right? It's like love master, kill a master, right? This is the golem. It kind of looked like that grayish color, like he looked like this guy that couldn't even be real, right? Well, point being that Emet also has another anagram in English. Time. Time and gravity are directly linked to each other. You've seen the movie Interstellar. They land on the planet, right, that's next to the black hole gargantuan. They're there for 45 minutes and 23 years pass on the ship because of mass time dilation. They're in a high mass environment. The giant wave came, delayed them, and they get back to the ship. The guy's been in cryo for 23 years. And then they're facing the fact that all their family is much older now and everything. They've just dramatically increased the length of their trip because of their visit to that one planet that was a failed visit anyway. Well, the whole thing in the movie, if you remember, was about love transcending time. Love is metaphysical gravity. Gravity controls and can transcend time. So when we start to think of it from this perspective that, wait a minute, all of this experience that we have, maybe our entire perception is just a limited reference. And we have to be open to the fact that it might just be a limited reference. And as we expand our awareness and consciousness, we start to see hyperdimension. We realize it's a cylinder. It's not a rectangle, and it's not a circle. It's both. All of life is like this, right? It's like the yin-yang symbol. I love this one meme that went out. It was like this picture of the black part of the yin-yang and then the white part of the yin-yang symbol. And it says, here is the good, here is the bad. And then the little circle that goes inside the yin-yang symbol on both sides is like, here is the good inside the bad, and here's the bad inside the good.
Right.
It's all one.
Right.
This is what the guy meant when I was in Hong Kong. And so that has been my journey, and that's been my hero's journey. The game is built on a hero's journey. You start off in life with separation. You go through the 7 sins that you hate yourself for, lust, gluttony, ego, all of these aspects of the self as you form your persona, because your persona becomes the things that you decide what you're not by feeling and experiencing shame. So it's not the sin that makes a difficult world, it's the shame that we carry for it that makes the world a very difficult place at times. So what happens is we go through this life and then we finally get to this midlife point where we have this crisis. And this is the same with every Tom Cruise movie. You've got this cocky guy who's like out chasing girls and doing all this stuff, right? But he's really talented somehow. He's got this talent. And there's like a mentor. And then somehow something happens. Gandalf the Grey dies and is lost. And so Frodo has to find his own path. But then Gandalf comes back as Gandalf the White, right? And it's the exact moment that the orcs show up in the picture, because you cannot have greater light without greater darkness.
Right.
The balance must always be there, right? It's just like the Force in Star Wars. So then he goes through this stage and then he has a crisis. He loses the mentor, he has the crisis, and then the crisis causes him to find within himself or herself the gold. To turn this difficult situation into the soul alchemy that allows him to transcend and resurrect into an entirely new personage. Like he finds himself through this level of acceptance, whereas on the way through this arc, which was really just this, descending arc to then be eclipsed by an ascending arc, as you go around this cycle of life, then you find yourself within, you get humbled through the process. It's like every Tom Cruise movie. And then he meets the woman, because the woman somehow brings, or the opposite sex, as the case may be, brings out this soul alchemy within us, because that's actually just a representation of him meeting the love within himself. And she is the archetype of him falling in love with himself. Because the things that she falls in love with in him, and she brings this soul alchemy out of him, is the gift from the goddess stage. There's 17 stages in the hero's journey. And what Joseph Campbell did is he took thousands on thousands on thousands of myth stories, everything passed by word of mouth, written down, every story throughout humanity, and he found that they all had the same arc. This is the arc we love. You cannot have a successful movie unless you follow the hero's journey arc. So then he comes back, he takes the gift from the goddess, the elixir of life. That elixir of life is going to bring a new way of looking at the world, where it's no longer about scarcity and death and end of life. And so everything's against a clock and you have to do instead of be. He brings this elixir of life and then he unites the two worlds. He becomes a master of two worlds. The special world that he fell into when he was going through his crisis, the spiritual world somehow, and the material world coming back into one. That is Hermes. Hermes is standing at this zone of merger of heaven and earth. So we put our arms to the square like this when we testify. You know what it represents? It represents this altar of earth, the earth plane and the heaven plane, the right triangle, right? We put our hands out, even the thumb straight out like this as well. This represents making an oath, a covenant at the altar where earth meets heaven.
Wow.
That is what is happening now. The Philosopher's Stone is the representation of understanding that the middle way can actually be balanced this balance of opposites, the merger of masculine and feminine. And all of this means that we have now a new understanding of what sovereignty is, our own divinity within. And to me, Bitcoin is one part of a massive wave of change that is coming onto the earth right now.
Yeah.
It's one critical part of it, but it's just like meeting that girl in a way. When Bitcoin entered your life, Satoshi Nakamoto, the wisdom from the field, when that enters your life, then all of a sudden your life is now informed that something is changing. Something inside me changed for that external change to actually happen and occur. It's no difference than meeting the girl. So this is the hero's journey story. Bitcoin is playing that role of the wisdom, which, interesting, the entire hero's journey is about the woman bringing the Sophia. That's her name, Sophia. This merger of opposites that happens right at the crown chakra. And I think it's actually part of this crown chakra awakening that's happening as we move into the throat chakra. Now, some are moving into the crown. This is a shift that I think is going to be happening. It's just part of the next aeon. The next 2,000 years are going to be part and parcel of this.
This is fantastic. I love this, the oath, because that's another good framing for Bitcoin, is like it's the first unbreakable oath, right? That we've actually spoken something into existence. Satoshi spoke something into existence, but not him doing it wasn't enough, right? He needs all these participants. He needs all these miners. He needs all these developers. He needs all the capital. Like, it's being spoken into existence, but it's done in a way that it's like an oath that can't be broken, right? Like an unbreakable promise. Basically, 21 million. It's just this social point of social consensus, but no one knows how to break it.
But he had to do it anonymously.
Yeah. Because it has its own creation myth.
Because a prophet will never be accepted in his own land.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.